Foreword for the people who think they don't need this. Honestly, that title is doing a lot of work because the people who think they don't need this are usually the first people who need to slow down and look in the mirror. It's not because they're bad people. It's not because they don't care. It's not because they're dumb. It's usually the opposite. They care. They care a lot. The player cares, the parents care, the coaches care. The problem is caring when it gets fused with ego, fear, identity, and urgency, starts dressing itself up as wisdom. And that's where baseball gets weird. Players say, I don't need this. I need more reps. Parents say, we don't need this. I just need to get my kid more exposure. And then the coaches say, I don't need this. I've been around the game long enough. I know the game. And maybe all of this is partly true, but partly true is a dangerous place to live because the ego loves partly true. The ego doesn't need a full lie. It just needs enough truth to avoid looking at the real problem. And that's the whole point of this foreword. This book isn't for the person who already knows they're overloaded. It's for the person who thinks their overload is just commitment. It's for the player who thinks the next cue is going to save them, right? The next drill, the next video, the next one-on-one private lesson, okay, the next gadget or tool, the next arm care velo program, the next magic phrase from a coach, right, who wears quarter zips and says process 12 times, before breakfast. It's for the player who keeps adding because adding feels like progress. But at some point, adding becomes avoidance. In baseball, it's very easy to hide from the actual problem inside more work. More work feels noble. More swings feel responsible. Okay, more information feels advanced. But if the player can't access himself when the game gets uncomfortable, then more isn't always better. More might just be more noise. And the ego hates that. The ego wants to believe the answer is something external because external problems are easier to deal with. If the problem is bat path, we can fix that, right? If it's arm slot, if it's something strength-wise, we can fix that or we can chase that. If the problem's exposure, we can buy another tournament, drive another 12 hours, right? Book more hotels and pretend we're building a future instead of managing anxiety with cash and a credit card. But if the problem is the system underneath the player, right, now we have to get honest. We gotta get the mirror out. We gotta ask different questions. What happens to this player when he fails in public? What happens to his body after one bad swing? What happens to his pace after a bad call? What happens to his breathing when he goes 0-2 real quick? What happens to his thoughts when a scout shows up or dad's face changes in the stands? What happens when the player who throws harder posts another clip online? Okay, what happens when the game stops cooperating? And that's where the EQOS lives. It's not in the clean rep. It's not in the round in the cage where everything feels great. The EQOS lives in the moment where baseball starts asking the hard question. Can you still access yourself? Can you stay available? Are you usable? Can you stay connected to the task? Can you recover before the next important thing happens? Because that's baseball. And the foreword makes this clear. This book is not anti-data. It's not anti-development. It's not anti-ambition. All of that matters. Some people might hear this message and immediately get defensive. They think, oh, well, we're not supposed to train hard? No, train your ass off. Measure, use data, use video, use good coaches, build the body, build the swing, build the arm. All right, get the tools dialed in. This is not an argument against development. I'm all for that. It's an argument against missing the actual problem. That's way different. And this is where the ego gets sneaky. The ego doesn't always look like arrogance. Sometimes ego looks like panic, overhelping. Sometimes it looks like, I just want what's best for my kid. I'm just trying to give him every opportunity. I'm just being demanding because I care. Sometimes it looks like a coach burying a player under 15 different cues and calling it instruction. And it's not always development. Sometimes that's adult anxiety, right? Holding a fungo. For players, the ego often says, I'm better than my results. And maybe you are. But there's a trap in that sentence, because if you keep feeling better than your results, eventually you have to ask why your actual performance keeps failing to represent your imagined ability. And that's not an insult. That's the door. And a lot of players live in the gap between who they think they are and who shows up when the game gets uncomfortable. In their head, they're the guy. In the cage, they look like that guy. In practice, man, they feel like that guy. When the game starts, now, umpire misses a call. First swing's a little ugly. Now the pitcher has a little more life than expected. Now the coach is watching. Tournament matters. Now the body tightens. Now the player starts trying to prove something. They're chasing outcome. And once a player starts trying to prove something and chases outcome, the game usually starts drifting away from him. Okay, because proof is not presence. Proof is ego. Proof says, this rep has to validate me. Presence says, this pitch has a job. It's a big difference. A player trapped in proof is no longer just playing baseball. He's defending an identity. And baseball's a terrible place to defend an identity because the game is built on failure. It's built on delay, embarrassment, uncertainty, and public evidence. Baseball will expose the fake self. Not because it's cruel, but because it's honest. And that's why this forward matters. And I'm not just trying to be cute here. It's a warning. If you think this isn't for you, pay attention to the part of you that needs this to be true. Okay, that part might be protecting you from something. Maybe it's protecting your confidence or your image, the story you've built up about yourself as a player or a parent or a coach. Maybe it's protecting you from admitting that more effort hasn't solved the real problem. And that's where this gets deeper, because nobody wants to admit they've been solving the wrong problem. Players don't want to admit it. Parents, coaches, nobody wants to admit that. Coaches are some of the hardest people in the world to teach, which is funny because our entire job is supposed to be helping people learn. But the coach ego is brutal. A coach can mean well and still bury players, right? Way too much data, way too many cues, too many voices, too many words, just too much noise. And let's call it what it is. Sometimes, I'm air quoting this, development becomes a socially acceptable way for adults to avoid silence. We see a player struggling and we feel uncomfortable. So we talk, we correct, we cue, we add things, we explain, we try to fix. But the player's already cooked. Their breathing is short, their body's tight, thoughts are loud, pace is gone, all over the place. And now the adult adds more information into a system that already can't hold what's currently happening. It's not coaching. Let's just put more paper on a desk that's already covered. It may be well-intentioned clutter, but clutter is still clutter. And baseball punishes clutter. Okay, think about the hitter in the batter's box. He's already thinking. Okay, and usually it's negative thoughts. Don't be late. Don't chase. Stay back. Get the foot down. See it deep. All right, coach is watching. Dad's mad. I need a hit. My hitting coach is here. I've been struggling. The kid on the other team went 3 for 4. If I fail here, I might lose my spot. Now the coach yells, hey, relax. Sweet. All right, that should solve it. Because nothing relaxes a teenager or a pro player or college player, anybody for that matter, under pressure, like an adult publicly pointing out that they are not relaxed. That's not a pathway. That's just a diagnosis shouted from the dugout. And in that moment, the player doesn't need more ego from adults. Okay, he needs less noise, better timing, a cleaner way back to the task. That's the EQOS. That's the operating system. And a Foreword is calling this out early. It's saying, before we get into the full system, we need to deal with the part of you that's going to resist seeing it. Because ego doesn't like being observed. The second you observe ego, it loses some of its power. If the player ego says, I don't need this, I just need confidence. Confidence is often the wrong foundation. Okay? Confidence isn't magic. Confidence doesn't just appear. Confidence requires evidence. And confidence feels great when everything's going well because there's evidence. When the swing feels good, the arm's alive, numbers are moving, coach is happy, players, the player feels like himself. It's easy. The question is not whether you can feel confident when things are clean and going well. The question is whether you can still function when confidence dips, because that's baseball. It will dip. Your rhythm will dip, timing, feelings. Your body's going to feel weird. You're going to have days where you don't feel like yourself. And if your whole identity depends on feeling good before you can compete, you are not stable. You are mood dependent. And mood dependent players are expensive. They cost you innings, they cost you at-bats, free passes, development time. They cost trust. They cost themselves opportunities because coaches don't know which version is showing up today. That's why the EQOS isn't trying to make players feel amazing all the time. And that's childish. The goal is not constant confidence. The goal is access. Can you access your skill when you don't feel perfect? Can you access your game when the crowd gets loud? Can you access your decision making when the last rep was ugly? Can you access your breathing when your body wants to run away from discomfort? Can you access your next pitch and execute when the last pitch made you look stupid? Right? That's the actual game. For parents, this Foreword is probably uncomfortable. Right? Good. It should be, because parents are often doing everything the herd is doing because everyone else seems terrified their kid is falling behind. Okay, the herd is powerful. The herd says everybody's doing showcases, so we got to do it too. Right? The herd says everyone is a private coach. Right? We got to hire one. Everyone's posting clips. Everyone's chasing velo. We got to do it too. And if you're not careful, your kid's development stops being a thoughtful process and becomes a fear-based reaction to what everybody else is doing. And that's not leadership. That's not your job. And kids feel this. They feel when baseball becomes a family anxiety project, right? The car ride home carries more weight than the actual game itself. Kid feels when your mood changes based on box scores or game changer. The kid feels it when a parent is arguing over hits or errors. The kid feels it when their performances become the weather system for the house. And again, most parents aren't trying to hurt their kids. They're trying to help. But help filtered through fear often becomes pressure. And pressure doesn't have to be loud to be heavy. Sometimes pressure is silence. Sometimes pressure is the sigh after the game or the long stare. Sometimes pressure is a parent who says nothing, but somehow makes the kid feel like the entire weekend is turned into some kind of courtroom. And that kid's not just carrying baseball anymore. He's carrying you. This doesn't make you evil. It makes you responsible. And responsibility is where growth starts. Okay, not guilt. Guilt is useless if it doesn't change behavior. Responsibility asks a better question. Am I stabilizing my kid or am I adding load? That question belongs in every household. Should replace your live, love, laugh sign with that. Am I stabilizing my kid or am I adding load? For coaches, the question is very similar. Am I developing this player? Am I feeding my own need to feel useful? That one might sting, but it's real. It's a lot of overcoaching. It's just coaching trying to manage their own discomfort. The player struggles and the coach feels the urge to intervene. Not always because the player needs it, sometimes because the coach can't sit still with the uncertainty. So coaches say too much. They correct too quickly. They add unneeded cues before the players even had a chance to process the last rep. We start building urgency. We start building the player around urgency instead of readiness. And now the player isn't developing, right? They're surviving the coach's noise. That's why this book is anti-missing the actual problem. It's not anti-coaching. Better coaching matters, but better coaching is often subtractive. It removes noise. It creates clarity. It gives the player one job. It reads the state before it attacks the swing. It knows when to speak up and when to shut up. And yes, shutting up is a massive coaching skill, rarely taught, terribly needed. The Foreword also says a lot of players today are not undertrained. They're overloaded. That might be the most important line of the whole opening, because baseball has been trained to treat every problem like a lack. Not enough reps, not enough toughness, not enough confidence, not enough IQ, not enough development, not enough exposure, not enough data, not enough work. But what if the real issue isn't always absence? What if the issue is excess? Too many voices, too many cues, too much comparison, too much identity pressure, too much investment, too much screen input, too much performance meaning attached to every rep, too much noise, too much urgency, too much self-consciousness. A player can be buried under help, and that's the strange tragedy of modern development. Everyone is trying to make the player better, and the player can't breathe under that pile. And then when he struggles, we blame him, right? We say he's soft, he's in his head, he needs confidence. He just needs to compete, he needs to be a dog. Well, maybe, or maybe, just maybe the system's full. Maybe the player's emotional, cognitive, physical capacity is already getting drained before the first pitch. Maybe the issue isn't that he doesn't care. Maybe the issue is that he cares in a way his system can't organize yet. And that's where ego becomes important, because ego turns care into identity. A player says, I want to play well. An ego-fused player says, if I don't play well, something is wrong with me. And those are two different worlds. Healthy parent says, I want to support my kid. An ego-fused parent says, my kid's performance reflects whether I'm doing this right. Again, two different worlds. A healthy coach says, I want to help this player develop. An ego-fused coach says, if this player struggles, it threatens my identity as someone who knows the game. Two different worlds again, and baseball exposes all of it. Okay, that's why, again, this foreword is important. It's not really about people who don't need the book. It's about the part of every person that doesn't want to need the book. That part lives in all of us. Okay, the player, the parent, the coach, all got it. I have it. You have it. Everyone who spent time in baseball has some area where they're protecting a story. A story about being enough, about being advanced, about being right, committed. A story about being the kind of parent who does everything. A story about being a coach who sees everything. And a story about being the player who should be better than his results. And the problem with stories is that they can become prisons. A player who has to be the guy can't just take a normal 0 for 4 day. A parent who has to be the perfect baseball parent can't just let the kid breathe. A coach who's got to be the smartest dude on the field can't stop talking long enough to read a player, right? That's ego. And it's not villain ego, right? It's not like the movie villain stuff. It's human ego, the thing that protects us from shame and often keeps us from the truth. And performance doesn't improve without truth. We can't train what we refuse to see. You can't fix what your identity won't let you admit. You can't build a stable player if every adult around him is unstable in nicer clothes. So, this foreword is a filter. It asks, are you willing to look deeper? Are you willing to stop calling every breakdown competence? Are you willing to stop calling every mistake mechanics? Are you willing to stop calling every overloaded kid soft? Are you willing to stop treating more as automatically better? Are you willing to ask whether the system underneath the player can actually hold what baseball is asking to carry, because that is the EQOS question. And once you ask it, the game starts looking a bit different. You start seeing the hitter who doesn't need another swing thought. He needs to stop treating every at bat like a verdict on his identity. You start seeing the pitcher who doesn't need someone yelling, throw strikes. Brilliant stuff, by the way. Yeah, throw strikes. It's really, really groundbreaking. We need to learn how to recover after the first miss, because one miss becoming 6 is not a command issue alone. It's a system issue. You start seeing the catcher who doesn't need to be tougher. He needs to stop carrying the entire inning on his face. You start seeing the parent who doesn't need to spend more. They need to become steadier. You start seeing the coach who doesn't need more language. They need cleaner language and maybe fewer words. That's the shift. This book is for the people who think they don't need it, because the first sign you need a better lens is often the belief that your current lens is complete. That's the ego move. I already see it. All right, maybe you do, but maybe you're only seeing the part that protects your existing explanation. And that's the danger. Baseball's a long history of lazy explanation. He's in his head. He's pressing. He just needs some confidence. He's too emotional. He needs to relax. He's got the tools, but it doesn't show up. Right? And those phrases aren't always wrong. They're just not deep enough. Right? They describe smoke. They don't explain fire. EQOS is trying to explain the fire. The player is not just performing a skill. He's running a system under pressure. And when that system gets overloaded, the player changes. The body changes. The pace, the thoughts, the face. The decisions change. The behavior changes. Then the skill starts breaking down. And if you only jump in at the skill breakdown, you are late. And late coaching is usually loud coaching. Loud coaching is often weak coaching. The better move is earlier observation. What changed first? Did the player speed up? Did he get tight? Did he start protecting? Right? Did he start chasing control? Did he start trying to prove something? Did the adult response add clarity or add load? That's the work. So when the foreword says, if you think this is not for you, there's a decent chance this is for you. That's not a marketing line. That's a psychological line. Because resistance is information. Defensiveness is information. The part of you that says, I don't need this, might be the exact part that needs to be examined. And that applies to the player, parent, and coach. For the player, where are you hiding inside more work? Where are you adding cues because you don't want to face the pressure underneath? Where are you confusing talent with access? Where are you protecting an identity instead of competing cleanly? For the parent, where are you helping from fear? Where are you following the herd? Where are you making baseball heavier than it needs to be? Where are you trying to buy certainty in a game that offers none? And for the coach, where are you using data to look advanced while actually missing the player? Where are you speaking because you feel uncomfortable? Where are you calling it development when it's just really noise? Where are you trying to win the argument instead of read the system? Hey, that's the foreword. It's not a warning shot. It says, before we talk about the operating system, let's deal with the reason people miss it. They miss it because the surface is seductive. Tools are seductive. Numbers, effort, exposure. Being seen is seductive. Being right is seductive. But baseball isn't asking who looks the most committed. It's asking what holds. Right? What holds after failure? What holds after embarrassment? What holds after comparison? What holds when the body speeds up? What holds when the game gets slow and the mind gets loud? That's what this series is going to unpack. Right? Not slogans, not fake mental toughness, not the believe in yourself stuff. This is about what a player can actually hold, because the game is not just exposing skill. It's exposing the operating system underneath it. And if you think you don't need that lens, that might be your first useful data point.